If you go about 14 kilometers up from the top part of Morocco, you will hit Gibraltar, which is owned by the UK. It's like this small piece of Britain hanging out at the bottom of Spain. And guess what? It's got this massive rock called the Rock of Gibraltar, which totally stands out there. But seriously, why does the UK even own this bit of land in southern Spain? And what is it like living there? Let me break down the backstory for you. So, back in 1704, during this big fight called the War of the Spanish Succession, a bunch of English and Dutch ships took over Gibraltar. Then, 9 years later, Spain officially handed it over to the British. Nowadays, Gibraltar pretty much runs its own show with its own government, but the UK still handles things like keeping it safe and dealing with other countries. Well, there is a historical fact which will be surprising for you. The name Gibraltar actually comes from Arabic thanks to this military leader dude named Tariq ibn Ziyad back in the 8th century. He named it Jabal Tariq, which means Mountain of Tariq. And, Gibraltar sounds kind of like Jabal Tariq. Let's talk about the population in Gibraltar. So, Gibraltar has been a bit of a tug of war between the UK and Spain for ages. Spain thinks it should belong to them, but the people of Gibraltar have always said they want to stick with the British. In 2002, they had a big vote about it, and more than 99% of the people said they wanted to stay British. But when it came to the vote on whether to stay in the European Union in 2016, about 75% of Gibraltarians voted to remain. So when Brexit happened, you can bet they were not thrilled. Now, about the population, there is around 33 to 34,000 people living there. If Gibraltar ever decided to break off from the UK and be its own country, it would be one of the smallest countries out there. It's tinier than San Marino and only bigger than Monaco and Vatican City. Now it's time to talk about density of Gibraltar. It is packed with about 3,400 people into each square kilometer. It's like 12 times denser than the UK itself. English is the main language there, but a lot of people also speak Spanish, and some even chat in a mix called Llanito, which blends Spanish with English, Maltese, Portuguese, and Italian words. When it comes to money matters, Gibraltar's doing pretty well. Their GDP is around £2.4 billion, and each person there has about £70,000 on average, which is way more than in the UK. They have got their own currency, the Gibraltar pound, but it is basically the same as the British pound. Let's talk economy of Gibraltar. So, they're big on services like tourism, finance, and shipping. But they have one booming industry there. The online gambling is a massive deal there, making up about a quarter of Gibraltar's cash flow. And around 3,500 men are working in this online gambling gig. Now, why is this little spot so appealing to online betting companies? Well, for starters, these companies only pay a 10% tax, which is very low. Plus, there is no other heavy taxes like capital gains or VAT. So, it's like a jackpot for these businesses to set up shops there. Gibraltar is basically a hot spot for online money-making ventures. Now, let's talk about the weather in Gibraltar. It's very there. Since it's down in the sunny part of Spain, you can expect mild winters and hot summers. They even hit a temperatures 40.6 degrees Celsius once, which beats the UK's record by a smidge. But other than the awesome Mediterranean vibes, life there's pretty much like in the UK, same laws, same king, same language and currency. But here is a twist. While Brits drive on the left side of the road, in Gibraltar, they're all about driving on the right. It is because they are right next door to Spain, where they also drive on the right. Imagine the chaos if you had to switch sides every time you cross the border. Let's talk about the big star of Gibraltar, the Rock. This massive rock is like the boss of the place, standing tall at 426 meters high. That's 100 meters taller than the Eiffel Tower, if you can believe it. Interestingly, it is not just any old rock. It's home to around 300 Barbary macaques, the only wild monkeys roaming around Europe. These little guys are doing pretty well there, unlike in Africa where their numbers are dropping because of hunting and trees getting chopped down. So while it's cool to see them thriving, it can be a bit of a hassle for the locals who have to put up with their shenanigans. Let's talk about the rock again. This massive chunk of stone has been around for about 55 million years, formed when African and European tectonic plates got collided. Inside, there is this crazy maze of tunnels called the Great Siege Tunnels, built back in 1782 by the British during a big fight with the Spanish. Now, here is where things get interesting. Gibraltar sits right on the Gibraltar Strait, a narrow stretch of water that links the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. It's like the bridge between Spain and Morocco, making it super vital for ships traveling between Europe and the rest of the world. This strait is a bustling highway for ships, about 14 kilometers wide at its slimmest spot. And it's not just about boats, the strait's a big deal politically and economically too. It's like a doorway between Europe and Africa, and the countries around rely on it big time for trade and tourism, which is capital of Gibraltar. Interestingly, it doesn't really have one. Some say Gibraltar itself is the capital, but most people agree that the west side of the rock. It is where you'll find most of the action, nestled between the rocky slopes and the bay. And back in 2012, around 26,000 folks called it home, making up most of the territory's population. Here's something that caught my eye. The life expectancy in Gibraltar, especially for guys, is kind of on the low side, which about 75 years. You would think being in the Mediterranean should have been high, but it isn't. I thought maybe people smoke a lot here, which could be dragging down the numbers. And guess what? I was right. A quick Google search confirmed it. Around 35% of adults in Gibraltar puff away, one of the highest rates in the world. And that's the lowdown on Gibraltar, guys. A tiny but pretty interesting slice of the UK. If you're into this stuff, smash that like button, and why not subscribe? And hit the bell icon for our latest videos. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time for more cool facts.